Hi, Carla. Hi, Russ. Hi, Bill. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Marzia. Or Corny Benson. Hello. Sorry for messing up your name. Hi, Alex. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's story of event where we will invite and highlight the stories of entrepreneurs and small business owners making their mark in Iowa. We want to remind you that as you create your own story, treat yourself to this time each month to rekindle your entrepreneurial spirit. My name is TJ Daniels, and I am the program director of the Iowa Center's Women's Business Center. The Iowa Center's Women's Business Center is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. You will all receive an email after this event from my colleague Katie Hinches thanking you for attending today's session, information on how to connect to our speaker, as well as a form to complete. Please do us a big favor and take some time to fill this form out. This information allows us to continue providing free educational programming for small business owners in Iowa. Now go ahead and please take some time to locate the chat function on your Zoom screens so you could join the conversation by introducing yourself and your business, including the links, asking questions, or adding comments. Today's story of guest interviewer is Franklin Codell. Franklin currently serves the Central Iowa community as a board member for the Iowa Center for Economic Success and the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines. He also invests and supports the growth of local small businesses and startups like xBk. Franklin is a graduate of Harvard University and has an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. Franklin and his family live in West Des Moines. I will turn the screen over to Franklin to introduce today's speaker, Tobi Parks. Thank you so much for spending time with us today to share your story.
Thanks, TJ, and welcome everybody. We're going to have a super exciting hour. It'll go by pretty quickly. We have a very interesting story to share about a business here in Des Moines, xBk, and Tobi Parks, who's on in just a minute, will start sharing that story. I appreciate those words, TJ, and do believe strongly in what the Iowa Center is doing to support entrepreneurs and small business owners, and especially those that are seeking access to capital and opportunity to learn how to be good small business owners. This is a great way to not only strengthen the community, but to create wealth and opportunity for people and their families. So we're very excited to tell our story about xBk, and to give you a little incentive to stay on for the whole time, we're going to give you a little surprise announcement at the end of the conversation here. So Tobi, I'm not going to introduce you. You're going to introduce yourself. Tobi is somebody who I've really enjoyed getting to know in the last few years, and has just quite an amazing journey and an amazing story. So Tobi, why don't you share us just a little bit about your background and about yourself?
Thanks, Franklin, and thanks to the Iowa Center and everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's a great honor to be here today and to talk about the work that I've been doing here in Des Moines, and to highlight what the Iowa Center has done and really what they've done to help me get my business off the ground. And so I just want to thank everybody first and foremost. In terms of who I am, again, my name is Tobi Parks, and I am a lawyer, and I am the owner and CEO of xBk, which is a 250 cap live music venue here in Des Moines that opened in September of 2019. I also am the vice president of the board for the National Independent Venue Foundation, which is the 501c3 nonprofit arm of the NEVA Trade Association, which we may talk about that a little bit, but anyway, I spent my career primarily working in the live music sector. I like to consider myself a musician first and foremost, and I am one of those musicians that had a plan B, a backup plan if I didn't make it as a musician. And that backup plan was working for Sony Music. And so my history is, I've done some work in radio, worked in television for a bit, but the bulk of my career I spent doing copyright and licensing work for Sony Music for the Columbia and Epic labels there, and basically moved to Des Moines, where I decided to go to law school, and we'll get into the reasons for that. I'm a graduate of Drake Law. I also hold a master's degree in media literacy from Webster University in St. Louis, and yeah, that's pretty much my intro.
So tell us what xBk means and how you chose to move to Des Moines from hip Brooklyn, New York.
Well, xBk stands for X Brooklyn, which, as Franklin just mentioned, is where I moved from. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about the name because it was intentional around kind of calling out the concept of being X and from New York and from Brooklyn. And around 2012, my wife and I decided that we wanted to leave New York City. We had a couple of kids, and for anyone who's ever lived in New York City, you can probably imagine raising children there is not easy. And in 2012, we had decided that we wanted to leave the city, and our prerequisites at the time were to find a location where, one, gay marriage was legal, because at that time it wasn't legal across the United States, and two, someplace where we had family support. And my wife's sister was a professor at Drake, and gay marriage was legal in Iowa. And so we said, okay, that's where we're going. And I had, prior to that time of making that decision, I had been to Iowa generally one other time, maybe two times, and only to Des Moines once. And we didn't end up actually making the move to Des Moines until 2015. But in that interim period, in those 3 years, I spent a lot of time traveling back and forth. I think similar to a lot of people who might be on the coasts, as my wife and I were making that decision, my initial impulse was, there is no way I'm moving to Iowa. The thought I think a lot of people have, which is an unfortunate one, is that, it's corn and soybeans and there's not art and culture. And, what I discovered in those interim 3 years was exactly how much art and culture really is here and how much support is here for artists. And really in that 3-year period of time and getting to know the creative community of the city, getting to know a lot of the people, both on sort of the business side and within the actual arts community here, just really fell in love with the community that's been developed, and was wholeheartedly 100% on board and excited to be in Des Moines by the time we moved.
So when you got here, you talked about meeting people and so on. Did you have already in your mind a vision of what you wanted to do with some of the things? I know you've started a record label, you started a nonprofit, you have this live music venue now, but was that all fully formed in 2015, or how did that progress from 2015 to say 2018 or 2019 when you started working on the venue?
Yeah, I mean, it was a progression from the time that we decided that we were going to move. I mean, one of the things, what I did in the music industry and what I did working for Sony is a very sort of unique space in the music industry. And it's not something that translates to what the industries are most known here in Des Moines, which is, like insurance and banking. And so I knew that whatever I was going to do, I had to kind of carve my own space. And at the time that we made the decision to move, Sony wasn't really sure if they were going to let me do a remote situation. And I didn't really know exactly what was here. And I knew that I wanted to continue to work in music, and I wanted to find ways that I can connect to community, because I've always been very, very much a community centered person. And then also coming to the understanding of realizing I'm moving to a new city, I can kind of make my own way. And so in those 3 years that I was spent traveling back and forth between Des Moines and New York, I just set up tons of different meetings and went to coffee and breakfast and any other meal that you could with, as many people that would sit down with me here as possible. And one of those people were Zach Mannheimer, who was the executive director of the Des Moines Social Club at the time. And at the point of my transition, the Social Club was an existing organization, but they had just gotten the complex downtown, the old firehouse downtown, and we're in the midst of that renovation. There's a lot of excitement happening in the city, I think, around that initiative, as well as, creatively, there was a lot of energy in the city at that time. And I sat down with Zach, and, him also being an ex-New Yorker, asked him, so how did you get into this? Like, what drove you to Des Moines, and what excites you about the city? And the thing that he said, and it's always stuck with me, is that, he's like, Des Moines is one of those places that, you can pretty much do anything you want to do, and you can find support to do that. And, he was like, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've always wanted to start a nonprofit record label. And he was like, well, if you put together the plan, I can help introduce you to the people to make that plan a reality. And that's exactly what happened. And so, working with the Social Club, I founded Station One Records, which is a 501c3 nonprofit artist entrepreneurship program. So we work with individual music artists and sort of give them an education in music business, offer some services, and then we do some sort of traditional label services for them, like, providing funding for recording and other aspects.
So it's interesting, Toby, it was in this time window, so this probably 2015, I was an executive at Wells Fargo at the time and was on the board of the Social Club. And I'd go to the board meetings, and Zach Mannheimer, who was the executive director, he would bring in an artist or somebody who was associated with the Social Club to let the board get a little more familiar with what the Social Club was doing, and so on and so forth. And he brought you into one of the meetings, and you probably had only been here for a short time, and you talked about the record label. I think you were even maybe using a studio that was in the Social Club or had access to it, a recording studio. And I was very impressed by, your background and this like vision that you had and this excitement. And, I took your PowerPoint presentation and your business card at the time, and I just brought it home, and it ended up in a drawer. And a couple of years later, I wasn't at Wells Fargo anymore, and I pulled it out, and I actually made a small donation to Station One Records and attached a little message that said, Toby, what are you up to? Would love to connect. And within a few hours, you responded, and I'm like, okay, that's a very good sign. That's somebody who's on top of things. And we met for coffee, and at the time you had just started putting together the business plan for the live music venue and so on. And, I tell all that because I think you should start talking about how you started building out the space and all that. But it's amazing that when you put yourself out there, you never know what kind of connection you're going to make. And I think a lot of what you were doing and what Zach Mannheimer was very good at is just putting yourself out there to different groups to share the story. And I think that's something for all of the potential business owners or business owners on this call here today is, don't be afraid to invite yourself to the Rotary Club luncheon or the, board of arts in your community or whatever the right forums are, and tell your story, because you never know who's going to be listening in the audience who might be inspired by what you're doing and want to work or support your effort. It's just a great way for personal marketing. So let's flip the page, Toby. You have the record label, but then you decided that you're going to move ahead with this live music venue. And live music venues probably rank up there with restaurants as one of the more difficult businesses to start de novo.
Yeah.
And you were starting an independent. I mean, you're not like, there's not really a lot of franchising of live music. Like, you're not opening up a McDonald's or something where you have a franchise and a template and all this free advertising and branding. You're basically starting with an idea and a hammer and a nail. So why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of the building you bought, why you decided to buy where it is, and how you got to opening night?
Yeah. So kind of starting around the idea and the impetus of starting a live music venue. As I mentioned, I consider myself a musician first and foremost, and have toured a lot around the country and have seen a lot of music venues, and have always sort of, when I go to different places, looking at the things that really work and looking at the things that don't. And, what I realized here in Des Moines is that there were a number of people who had really started to lay the foundation of a live music community in the city. And they were really scrappy in putting that together. There were, at the time there was Vaudeville Muse, which unfortunately is closed due to the pandemic. But it was the only kind of small music venue that was an actual music venue. But it was very, I think Amadeo Rossi, who started it, it was really just sort of a passion project for him. It was like, if we want bands to stop in Des Moines when they're on tour, we need to give them a place to play. And he put this thing together, and it was just kind of the building blocks. And then Woolies came and really started to get people in the community interested in live music. And what I had realized in the course of time and being in Des Moines was that this community that all of these people came together to develop, it was an ecosystem now. And what needed to happen was, that one step up. And I am so thankful for all of the people that did the hard work over, 10, 15 years to really build that live music system here in Des Moines, and start getting acts to know that Des Moines is a place that is valid to stop on tour. But what I wanted to do was build a place that kind of took that ethos and took it one step further, and really investing in a space that was really a listening room and a listening environment, and taking a lot of what I saw in New York, and playing shows in New York and playing shows in other large cities, and putting that here. One, for a couple of different reasons, and this goes back to what I had mentioned around the name xBk, is, as I said, I think that there's a lot of elitism that exists on the coasts around arts and culture in the Midwest. And to me, the idea of saying, like, look, I left New York City and have created a space in Des Moines, Iowa, that can rival anything that is, of the same space, of the same capacity of any place in the country. And I think that, it's important that, every artist that comes through, and, Franklin, this, every artist that plays our venue is like, oh my goodness, I love this place, and it's been my favorite place on tour, and all of these things, and really starts to help tell the story of what we have to offer in our city. So in terms of, the process again, and just kind of getting back to the business process, through Station One, we had done a partnership with Drake University. And so I'd spent a lot of time on campus working with students a lot, and really loved the Drake neighborhood. One, loved the diversity of the neighborhood. Two, the fact that, in terms of the business ecosystem of the city, it's one of the few neighborhoods where I think most of the small businesses that are around here are owned by people of color and minorities. And that was really important to me. And also understanding, from what I understand, historically, the Drake neighborhood has had sort of a mixed reputation. And, to me, I thought that was crazy coming from Brooklyn, and coming to Des Moines, and people being like, well, the Drake neighborhood can be somewhat dangerous now and again. And I'm walking around being like, this place is amazing. It's, there's a plethora of diversity. There's great food. There's young people around, and with all the work that I was doing with students, I really wanted them to take that cross the street, cross 23rd Street, and see what else is down, further in the Dogtown area. And also realizing that a lot of young people on campus were very interested in the music industry and interested in live music. And, a lot of them didn't have cars, and needing to go, getting down to downtown could sometimes be difficult, and so there was one venue here in the Drake neighborhood called Lefties, which was primarily kind of like a punk and metal club. And then, looking to see, like, there's a wide open space to be able to put in something that could be more of a listening room environment, that can, be a place where we can have a mix of, younger folks and older folks that really kind of come. And, what we wanted xBk to be was a destination venue, in the same way that you go to, say, the Civic Center to see a show. We wanted xBk to be a place that was, you were there specifically to see the entertainment. You weren't there to go and get drunk. You weren't there for any other reason other than to see the live music that was there.
And I think one of the ways that we express that is we're only open when we have a show.
When we have events.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, if you don't have a show tonight, you can't just go down there and have a couple beers. There's no TVs in the place, so you can't go watch the Iowa game in the day. It's purely when we're open. It's because we have a performance that night, and people can come a couple hours ahead of time and have a glass of wine or whatever, stay for the performance, have a good time, and then when it's over, we close, and that's our business hours, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, the other thing about live music venues in particular is that, you know, why they are so difficult to start and have are, you know, they require some very specific space requirements. Like you need a place that has high ceilings, you need a place that's big and open. And one of the things, like, you know, just speaking of why this particular location at 1159 24th Street, was a friend of mine had mentioned that his friend was selling a building. And, you know, I was like, oh, well, I'm kind of really interested, and I'm, you know, I'd like to start this music venue. And in my mind originally, what I had sort of my visions when I was living in New York was thinking like, you know, I wanted some place where I could maybe serve pizza and sell, you know, used books and records. And then, you know, we'd have occasional shows and that kind of thing. And I was like, well, I'm going to go take a look at it. And the moment that I walked in, and Franklin can attest, we have these really gorgeous open ceilings with these beautiful old trusses. The building is an old horse stable for the firehouse that's next door. And when you walk in the room, it really just gives a sense of history and culture, and just like this, it's really a beautiful space. And at the time, a company was making guitars in the front space where the venue is. And all I really saw were those rafters, and was like, this can be amazing. And we, you know, if we take out this thing and we open it up and we do this, like, this could be a really incredible music venue. And basically from that point, decided that that was the building that I wanted. Secondarily, there were a couple of other businesses that were located in the building that I thought would really enhance what we were trying to do, both in building art and culture, and two, in terms of what we wanted to do with live music. And one was the custom guitar builder that was there. And secondly, there was a recording studio. And as I had talked about trying to purchase the building, I talked to both of the business owners and said, you know, I really want you to stay here. There's a lot of benefit in our three businesses being able to be located in one centralized place, because there's nothing else like that in the city. There's no place where you can go and record music. You know, you can make your guitar, you can go record your guitar, and then you can go play it live, you know, and that was a really unique setup that we had. And so I worked hard to keep them in the building as tenants, and then spent basically 2 years working with the city around changing the occupancy of the building, working with the neighborhood association to get them on board with what we were trying to do. You know, I don't think that neighbors typically are terribly excited about a new bar opening up in, you know, a neighborhood location, which is what, you know, everybody thinks about Drake and Dogtown as more sort of a neighborhood area. And, you know, we did a lot of work in education around the difference between what a music venue is and what a bar or nightclub is, and what we were doing and what our business model, you know, why that was different, and, you know, got a lot of buy-in on that.
Yep. So during this time, you know, as Tobi's building the building out, and, you know, she and I, and we have another business partner named Tom, we're working on the business plan of, assuming the space gets finished out, what is all the equipment we need to buy to go in there? There's lighting, there's microphones, there's bar equipment, there's mixing boards, etc. And how are we going to pay for it all? And then how are we going to open the business? And I'll just interject and say that is occurring on a parallel path in a way, because to open the door, even once the building was finished and cleaned up, we figured it was going to take somewhere between $125,000 and $150,000 of startup capital to open the doors on day one. And so I worked closely with Tobi, and it's interesting to talk about how we found each other's roles in a way. Like I worked a lot with the numbers, helped set up the banking relationships. We got financing from a variety of sources, including I made a personal investment in the entity, and we were able to borrow money from the Iowa Center's revolving loan fund, as well as the state of Iowa's targeted small business program. I think without those funds, it would have been very difficult for us to open. That was a key part of our financing package. And And then there was countless things, Toby, that we had to kind of get into place before we opened. We had to get a point of sale system. We had to get an accounting system up and running, our payroll system, and insurance and other things like that. And I think, I had not worked with a small business so closely before. I was working at a very large company. I had armies of accountants that would do this stuff. But I will tell you that it was very interesting to look at the different systems that were out there. And it's amazing what, for a small monthly fee, you can get payroll systems that are complete soup to nuts. Where basically you just type in the hours every week or 2 weeks, and it does all the withholding, the payments, the accounting system. We use QuickBooks, is very easy to use once you understand it. And, we use it to keep track of our numbers and some invoicing and things like that. But there is a body of work on the business side that was equally important to get in place so that we could successfully open and be able to keep track of everything going into it. So maybe you can throw in your comment, Toby, about how we started to work together and how you rely on financial management and planning to run your business.
Well, that's the thing, is I cannot undersell how important it is to plan, and I think, it's interesting because I think you would look at both myself and Franklin and, imagining the two of us coming together to start a business may seem a little bit odd. But, I think the one thing that we both are very good at is planning. And I think that we both understand the importance of that. And establishing strong systems, and both, on the financial side, that was one of the benefits that I saw in working with Franklin, is him coming from a finance background, and working in banking and understanding that world. That was not my world. I'm a creative. I am not an accountant. And, I think that one, in terms of just giving advice, when you're putting together your team to build a business, it's imperative that you look at, finding the folks that can make up your deficits, right? So I'm an ideas person. I needed a numbers person, and somebody that, I have lots of wild ideas that cost lots of money. And, it's good to have somebody in your corner that's like, okay, well, you can do that, but, you have to weigh this against it, and Franklin has been fantastic at that and has really taught me a lot on understanding how to structure debt, how to structure our accounting, how to structure just sort of how the money flows, and that in and of itself can be, it's a whole job. That's Franklin's whole job with the business. Secondarily to that, it's also understanding the systems of how to run the business. I'm a musician. I understand how to create an environment for people. I understand how to create experiences for people. I have not been a facilities manager in my life, though, and owning a music venue is about running a facility. And it was really, it had a very steep learning curve, I think, in trying to understand what our processes were in terms of, from the point that we booked the show to, contracting with the artist, to getting them on the stage, to getting the staff in there, to getting all of those things. There is a process that we had to establish that could work for our team and that could make things run smoothly. So when you as a patron come into the venue, that you don't, my hope is that you come in and you have a good time and you don't have to think about anything, because if our process doesn't go well, your credit card doesn't get ran properly, or if our process doesn't go well, you don't get in the door at the time that the ticket says, so there are all of those other things that, again, planning, and, systems, coming up with procedure, coming up with policy. Those things are very, very key for us.
So let's go to, we're open, we're operating in the very early stages. Two areas I think I'd like you to comment on. One is, how do you think about marketing and advertising, both then, and we can talk about now as well if you want. And, how did you think about staffing? We don't have a big team, but we have some bartenders and some door managers and event planners. But how did you approach staffing, and how have you been able to create a stable staff in an industry known for high turnover, especially something like bartending?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the staff piece. I think that a lot of the networking that I did early on and meeting different people and getting to know the market, and the musicians and the artists and the different service folks in the market, was key to finding the right people. xBk definitely, above and beyond anything, I think we function with a particular ethos, something that is about building community. I think everybody that works on our staff and everybody that is involved in the management team and the ownership, I think that we all look at our business as something that's much bigger than ourselves. It's not, from my perspective, and I think, honestly, from even Franklin's perspective, even though this is a commercial business, there's definitely an altruistic component to what we're trying to do and trying to create something. To me, selfishly, I want to create a place that I want to go to, right? Like when I think about, what I experienced living in New York City, I want to create, have an art and culture experience that helps, that I want to go to, and also around helping to attract and retain folks in this Des Moines market and those things. And so I spent a lot of time talking with people about, what they wanted from a business standpoint, but then also meeting a lot of musicians and meeting the people that kind of make those shows happen, and talking to folks that had similar mindsets, like people that wanted to create community, and that was key. And so those, we started with the people that went into it with the same mindset with us, that we're like, yes, we're looking at this as more than just a paycheck. This is almost like a mission that we're building. So we did that. And then I think the other part is, to me, and I tell this with everybody that we hire, communication is the absolute key in our business. And, we have weekly staff meetings. My policy is, as a manager and as an owner, my job is to hire the best and brightest that know what they do better than what I do, and I think a lot of business owners sometimes get trapped in the mindset that they know everything, and that, their word and their vision is the only thing that matters. And I don't function that way. I don't think Franklin functions that way. I don't think Tom functions that way either. And we really take a lot of insight and influence from our staff, because, they're really the people that they need to have buy-in and investment in what we're doing. And we take their feedback seriously. And, our staff makes a lot of the business decisions, honestly. Like we, as we sat down in our owners meeting weekly, we talk about like, well, what does the staff think? What is their input? How do they feel about, and particularly in this period of time, like as we're going through a pandemic, and how do we operate in this environment? The staff has been really key and has really been driving a lot of our decision-making around those things. Yeah. So Franklin, I don't know if you want to add anything more onto that.
I love the, getting to know the staff, and I do think that they feel they're part of something bigger than just their job. And I think that's very important. And I'll also point out that at least in a couple of cases, the staff themselves are artists.
Yeah.
And play at xBk or help organize events at xBk. And so they're attending and participating in the venture as contributors, not just as employees. And I think that one of the things that I've really enjoyed about xBk, and I wasn't surprised that it's actually exceeded my expectations, is the amount of local bands and artists that you've been able to bring up onto the stage and give them a platform to hone their craft and develop their audience. And we have some artists that I wouldn't say like they play every Friday night or anything, but they are regular performers. Sometimes they're opening acts for larger bands. Sometimes they have their own record release parties or what have you. And so this, it feels like it has the potential to be the starting kernels of like a family, of a larger family of artists and people here in Des Moines.
Yeah, and that's really the community building component that I was talking about. That's so key and foundational to the success of our business. And going to, and I'm going to shift a little bit, Franklin, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but shifting a little bit to the advertising and marketing piece, because it ties into that. And, my philosophy on xBk has always been, the overhead for a music venue is high, so it's important to get people through the door. But I've also always known that on some level, the slow growth that we've been doing is key to our success, because we have to get the patrons, we have to get the artists, we have to really sort of court them and cultivate them and create the environment and community that we want. And that has been, I've always sort of held on to the philosophy of that, if you know, right? So xBk, we don't have big flashy signs on the outside of the building. A lot of people have no idea even that it's a music venue until they walk in the door and like, oh my goodness, I didn't, I thought this was a video store. But that's kind of the key to it, is that, once you come in and, our staff does an amazing job, I think, of making people feel welcome and making people feel comfortable and being very, very welcoming. And, this business is a one-on-one kind of business. It's, we say hello and look into the eyes of every person who walks into the building to make sure that they know that we appreciate that, they can spend their money anywhere in the city and they're making the choice to spend it with us. And that's important to us.
Yep. So just because many people on this call probably haven't heard of xBk, and some aren't even in the Des Moines market, why don't you share 2 or 3 events that we've had at xBk that you think showcase or exemplify the sensibility that you've been trying to bring forward, just to give an idea of for people on here, the kind of things that we've been doing here, and how many people come to it and what it was like.
Yeah, again, in terms of our philosophy of the organization and of the business is, really around equity, inclusion, diversity. Those things are very key. And, we do have a lot of, we try to be very diverse also in our programming. So like, yeah, we have a lot of, indie rock and Americana, but we also do hip hop and jazz and folk and country and all of these other kinds of things. But a couple of the things that I hold really important are a lot of the more community-based events that we do. So we work with a lot of different cultural and community organizations to help them present events. And one of the key things that we did last year was a Juneteenth celebration that we did in partnership with Iowa Public Radio and Iowa PBS. And really worked very collaboratively with those organizations, but also with different communities of color to bring together the diaspora of Black talent in the state of Iowa. And that was probably, so far in doing this business, was probably one of my most proud moments of being able to showcase the diversity that exists in our state, because I also don't think that people recognize actually really how diverse Iowa really is, how diverse the creative community is, and also giving a platform for a lot of these artists that didn't have that, they're not the ones necessarily getting played on IPR or on Iowa PBS, and, being able to give them that platform for that.
And you guys had TV cameras in there and everything, and it was broadcast on Iowa Public Television. Now, Tobi, is that still out on YouTube right now?
Yeah. You can still go to Iowa Public TV's website and you can stream the Juneteenth celebration. And we're going to be doing another one next year. So we're really excited about making this.
I would ask everybody on this call, if you didn't see it, or this webcast, if you didn't see it on TV, pull it up on YouTube. I watched it on YouTube, and I was blown away, not only by the professionalism of the presentation of it, but just by, like you said, it was about every 8 or 10 minutes, there was a different act. So in the course of, I can't remember if it was an hour and a half or 2 hours, you had a half a dozen or so different acts on there, and they were all so different. Yeah. Poetry reading, acoustic guitar, hip hop, it was everything in between. It was quite phenomenal. So that one was very well done. What about
yeah, and there's other things. I mean, again, Franklin has mentioned some of the like album release parties and different things that we do. The great thing about kind of going back to the nonprofit that I was talking about a little bit earlier, because I was so heavily involved in the nonprofit, we work a lot. We use the venue as a creative laboratory in a lot of ways. So one of the things that also really excites me is some of the collaboration we've been able to do with Drake students and with local artists, and being able to present things at the venue. So, I'm an adjunct at Drake, and, we have a class where students come in and, they want to learn about live event production. And so we use the venue as a laboratory, and we have them present shows. We have them work with local artists to present content and present shows. I'm sorry, I think my computer might be freezing, so I apologize if I'm a little jumpy here. And so that, that's been a really rewarding experience of being able to work with young folks. And then the other part is really cultivating the live music sector and folks that are, we work a lot with like the Des Moines Music Coalition, and bringing younger artists, like, literally like middle schoolers and high schoolers. We work with Girls Rock Des Moines, and helping give some of these folks their first opportunity to stand on a professional stage. And then our next steps that we're working on is to develop more of a workforce development oriented program where we can sort of remove the barriers of entry to the live music space for folks that, there's a lot of folks that are interested in getting into the creative industries, but don't know how, or don't have, learning to be a live sound engineer is, that can be a little bit difficult. And so, we want to provide opportunity for young folks who are interested in getting into this work and, creating spaces for mentorship and for apprenticeships and other opportunities for them to come in and learn how this business works.
Yeah, it's been interesting for me to see the technical side of the business is much more complicated than I thought. I mean, the amount of cables and mixing board and, the guys that do that stuff, they know what they're doing. And we've talked about having like a summer intern come in and learn how to be, somebody who's maybe in high school or that kind of age, develop those skills. It's almost like an apprenticeship, because that's a huge industry. The whole electronic and technical side of the business is very, very important. TJ, why don't I pause there before we go on to some other topics and see if you have any questions in the chat room or anything that you think we should touch on before we jump to some other things.
There are no questions just yet, but
Okay.
I do have one. How you survived during the pandemic, how we're able to pivot to keep the lights on, and then the importance of having a plan B. Like, do you have one now, like for the future, or I know you do, but
well, yeah. I mean, I'll say, in terms of the pandemic, we were oddly enough. I mean, as I mentioned, we opened in September of 2019, so we were actually closed longer than we were ever open. We didn't end up opening back up until April of 2021 of this past year. So we spent, a longer period of time closed due to the pandemic than we had been in business. In terms of the things that we were able to do to survive that, one, I think financial management was key, and Franklin was very, very good at helping put together the numbers for us to understand like exactly where our financial position was, and literally to the day of when we were going to be out of money, and knowing what we had to plan for and how we needed to adjust. Secondarily to that, we were able to source a number of different grants and other opportunities, both federally and from the state, that helped us stay afloat. I won't get into too much of the detail, but the organization that I had mentioned, the National Independent Venue Association, formed specifically to help save live music venues through the pandemic. And we were able to lobby the federal government for $16 billion to help save an industry. And so I spent a large part in terms of pivoting. When we weren't in business, I spent a lot of time, talking with Chuck Grassley's team and Joni Ernst's team, and the governor, and many different people and many of our legislators throughout the state to understand why art and culture and why live music venues are so key to communities and able to source those funds.
And we were going to be, as Toby said many times, the first to close and the last to open. It was going to be entertainment. I'll just add something just from everything Toby said was right. It was a real shame because we had been open about 6 months when COVID hit in March, and we were in March and April going to have our first profitable months. And then COVID hit, and like every act we had canceled, and we closed for over a year, as Toby mentioned. We went through a lot to apply for various grants. And it was interesting for me, and I'll just put something out there for all you business owners to think about, is there were a lot of grants out there. Some of them were sponsored by governments, whether it's state, federal, local. Others were organizations that had raised money from the corporate sector, like Main Street America. And I hadn't even heard of some of these. And Toby's like, hey, Lowe's is running something for small businesses. We should apply. And I'll just tell one story from the state in particular. There was a fund that was created by the governor through one of the CARES Acts that was intended to provide money to restaurants, bars, and live music venues that had been closed by, this was back in the early part of COVID when Governor Reynolds closed those for, I think it was maybe a 2, 3, 4 months during the early parts of COVID. And we applied for it. And I was talking to or emailing back and forth with somebody in the state government about the status for application, and they were looking for some more data or whatever. And she said, what's interesting is we were approved, we got our money. And she said, only 2% of the applications that were submitted were actually completed properly. And I looked at that and I was like, that means there's a premium on being ready, having your financial statements ready at all times, knowing the data about your business, whether that's your business license, whether that's your previous year's tax returns, whether it's your bank statements. These grants typically would ask for very kind of rudimentary basic financial information about your business. They wanted to know you existed to prevent fraud from happening. But she was like, we're trying to give away, $10 million and we can't find people to submit applications properly. And it kind of broke my heart because I know there's a lot of restaurants and bars at the time that were under tremendous stress financially and, couldn't get the money because the owners weren't submitting the information properly. So being on top of that and being all ready is important. And it was important for us. And as Toby said, we were able to get a wide variety of grants and loans and forgivable loans and paycheck protection program and things like that. And actually, I think our financial position today is in good shape. And, it's going to allow us to have a robust 2022, we hope, and continue to move forward. Although there's no question in my mind that we lost a lot of momentum. Mm-hmm. Toby talked a little bit about the marketing, and the brand awareness. And we were starting to hit our stride, it felt like in early 2020, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. And, a lot of people kind of checked out of going to live events, whether it was theater or sports events or anything. And I think there's still even some latent reticency to go out to those. It's something we'll just have to overcome. So I think it's set us back more from an awareness and marketing perspective and momentum perspective than it did from, necessarily a financial perspective. But I think we were fortunate to be able to access some of the programs that Toby mentioned.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And I just want to add one other thing from a personal standpoint is, the idea around perseverance, because, I had sunk my life savings into that building, into building out that building. And there was no way I was going to let the business go under, and so I actually, went back to work at my old employer to help cover some of the expenses that were needed to keep the venue going, because as I mentioned, live music venues have a lot of overhead. And just because we were in a pandemic didn't mean that, the mortgage stopped or that, the electricity, the utilities were shutting off or, all of these other things. Like there was still overhead that had to be taken care of. And so I think there's a certain amount of tenacity that we brought to the table in making sure there was no way that we were going to go under. I was not going to let that happen. And, so that's the other part of it. And, I think just also going, just touching base too on the awareness piece and, what we've done through COVID and what we've been able to bring, I think our biggest hurdle right now, I think, is consumer confidence, and getting people to understand that you can attend live music shows and you can do it safely. And it can be done in a way that, we can keep artists on the road, we can keep the doors open, but we need folks to really, adhere to safety protocols, whatever those may be. And I'm not going to, point fingers at anybody doing any particular thing. But for us, we feel like we have a pretty good policy in place that keeps people safe, that people feel comfortable when they come in. and just making sure that, if you come to xBk, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you feel comfortable and that you feel safe going to see live music. And because it's imperative to us that everybody stays healthy, and we're going to do everything we can in our power to make sure that that happens.
TJ's back on. What's on your mind?
Well, there was only 10 minutes left, and
Okay.
I know we could talk for forever, but because I have two great minds online, I just want to make sure to ask the question that I ask every person that I talk to. What's the one or two pieces of information you want to make sure the clients take away from today's presentation? That way, if we get this out of the way, then we could talk until 1.
Yeah. I think that there are two things that I would say that has been key. And we talked about this a little bit when we had one of our pre-planning meetings. I think the biggest issue for entrepreneurs, and from those that are successful and those who fail, and it's not always the case, but I think, being able to overcome fear. And I think that that's a key component, because the first thing is, you might be in this job where, you're working 40 hours a week and you have these really great ideas, and, it's scary to take that first step, but I think, and it goes to my second point, which is planning, provided that you can connect in and tap into the right resources, both from a brain trust standpoint, like finding people who can give you advice. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone. I've never met a person that doesn't want to talk about themselves, right? So picking up the phone and say, hey, I would like to bend your ear on your experience and expertise on X, Y, or Z. Don't be afraid to do that. Secondly, research, plan, make sure that what you're getting into financially and emotionally and all of those things, but don't be afraid to make the jump. I think that that's the thing. And for me, it took literally moving out of a city, being kind of, I won't say forced out of my full-time job, but, being sort of in this place of like, look, I have nothing to lose. I don't even know if I have a job. I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to go for it. And, the universe has done a very good job of taking care of me, because, I have been able to keep continuing to put one foot in front of the other, and have been very reliant on some incredibly smart people, and putting together a really super strong team of people around me that give me the best possible advice and moving forward. And, some of that is Franklin, some of that is my staff that's at xBk. Some of it is utilizing the resources that are available to us, like the Iowa Center, like the SBA, like the SCORE program through the SBA. There's a number of different, Drake Law School has a lot of opportunity. If you look for it, you can find it, and you can find the support. And going back to the prescient words of Zach Mannheimer, Des Moines is a place that if you have a dream and you want to do something, there's enough support here that you'll be able to do it. You just got to put in the work and the time and the effort to make it done.
Well said. And, hats off to you, Toby. You listen, you ask people for input, you surround yourself with people that have different perspectives and diverse perspectives. And I think it's really helped you, at times even alter the plans that you may have had walking into the room. Oh, I didn't think about that. That's helping me rethink things. So, well, I think we're going to close here. I have two things to say to this group before we wrap up. One is an ask, which is go to xbklive.com and sign up for the mailing list. We send an email out, about once a week or two?
Every week. Yep.
Every week with, just do it, because it's, even if you don't live here, you may come to Des Moines someday and it'd be nice to see. And I think it's just good to see what's coming through, what we're trying to do to develop it. And we would appreciate the support. Come to an event at xBk. We're very close to Drake, right around the corner from the Mars Cafe, University and 24th Street. And, tell a friend about what you heard today. Word of mouth is going to be our best way to grow our audience, is by having people that come to the venue and had a good time, tell a friend and bring a friend to the next show that they want to come to. And our final surprise announcement, being on the board, we've been trying to, we have been growing our revolving loan fund, and xBk was one of the early recipients of one of the revolving loans. And we've been dutifully making our payments, but we are announcing today that we are going to return the remaining balance of our loan into the fund early, so that it can be used for another business sooner than it otherwise would have been. We had another, I think, about 16 months left of payments. We're going to go ahead and write a check to the Iowa Center. I'm going to do that over the weekend. So team at the Iowa Center, you'll be getting our full payoff amount and put it back in the loan fund, and let's pay it forward to another business. And on top of that, there'll be a second check in there, which will be a donation from xBk to the loan fund so that you can grow it a little bit and continue to help support other businesses across the state with both your programming and with the loan fund itself. We're grateful for everybody for taking the time to hear our story, and Tobi or I are available through xBk if you have questions or want to take a tour or want to talk about a rental, or even if you want to come play, if you're a musician, let us know.
Well,
if you're looking for a bass player, Tobi's might be available.
Well, I just want to add on to what Franklin is saying too, in terms of, giving back. I think it's key. One of the key ethoses to xBk is the community that we keep coming back to, and the paying it forward and our ability to be able to give a little something back to the Iowa Center for one, and supporting me. Like, they were one of the first organizations to say yes to my plan and to what I was doing, and I can't thank them enough for the support that they've given me, and for the help of TJ and the whole team at the Iowa Center. And to remember, our local businesses are what make up our community. And, if everybody can go and, whether it's our business, I hope it's our business, or another business that's on the street, definitely during this holiday season, make sure that you're shopping local, make sure that you're, patronizing local businesses. And if you have the capacity to give, please give to our local, nonprofit organizations that are here in Des Moines, particularly things like the Iowa Center, Community Foundation, Des Moines Music Coalition, Station One Records, any of these, the arts, anything that, to us, it's important to uplift the arts. So anything that you can do to give back to community is key.
And that hoodie looks great too, and they are available at xBk.
They are available, yes, at our website. Again, if Franklin didn't mention it, xbklive.com. We also have a new trove of t-shirts and beanie caps and some baseball caps. So you can be decked out.
All right, back to you, TJ.
I am smiling too much. That is amazing, because of course, sometimes it's hard to lend to small businesses for whatever reason. So having the funds with the Iowa Center, it allows us to get funds to, or more capital to people that may not be able to qualify it otherwise. So thank you so much. And of course, it's been a pleasure working with you all. So as we head into the weekend, for sure, go check out xbklive.com and check out some of the amazing things they're doing. A date night, get some merch, whatever you could do to support the small businesses in our community. Also, make sure to check out the Iowa Center's website, www.theiowacenter.org. We have a lot of incredible programs coming up for the rest of December. Next week, December 7th, is the Small Business Essentials for Retention and Talent Acquisition for 2022. December 8th is Always Ready Financials, because of course, as we just talked about, you need to stay ready. So always ready. Then December 9th is AARP's Work for Yourself at 50 Plus. Then next week starts the final week of BizFluent, concentrating on HR, IT, security, and point of sale systems. So feel free to email me any questions you may have about any of the programs, or visit our website. And I will close this session today with my one piece of information: love what you do. Thank you so much for attending today's session.